And Administrator, I want to thank you for the work that you and FEMA did in my district a few years ago after the tornadoes in West Kentucky. I want to publicly say that. With respect to the text message behind me, how did you receive the text message? Did you know about it before it became public, or was it brought to your attention before the media made public with it?
It was brought to my attention on November 7th while I was in North Carolina with my leadership team checking in on recovery. It was mentioned to me that they had heard that there was a text message that a staff member had sent. I then directed my team to look into this. This was before the media inquiry or the media story came out. They reviewed it and looked into it on the 8th. They contacted me on November 9th. They showed me the text message. I still had not seen any media stories, and I directed the termination of the employee because it violates the way we conduct business.
And you've testified that you believe this was an isolated incident. Why should we believe that this is an isolated incident and not part of a pattern in FEMA? Because we've seen many other government agencies that we believe have become politicized and or weaponized. So, I mean, why should we believe this is an isolated incident?
Chairman, I understand your concern and I share your concern because I want to ensure that the American people know that FEMA is there to support all people, which is why we are conducting an investigation and why we have asked the IG to look into this further to ensure that this is not beyond the one employee who sent this message. It is not indicative of the rest of our workforce and it is completely unacceptable.
So, I want to go back to Ms. Washington. You terminated her. She was a part-time employee. If she were a full-time FEMA employee, could you have terminated her then and there on the spot?
We definitely have more flexibility within our intermittent employee HR practices, but we would have been able to take the necessary action to remove her until a full investigation had been done.
So, how likely would it have been that her termination would have been overturned because she would have been a full-time civil servant and been protected by the civil servant merit laws, tenure laws, whatever you want to call it?
Given the text of this message, it's very clear that this was an unacceptable type of behavior, and I don't believe it would have been overturned. I think the system worked.
Well, we're going to find out with a lot of federal employees that we believe should be held accountable for bad behavior. And that's one of the huge issues in this election, and this is going to be a priority for the new administration, and this is a role that this committee is going to play moving forward to try to work with the Trump administration, work with Elon Musk and Mr. M. Swamy to try to make government more efficient. So we'll see. We certainly believe that people, regardless of their party, regardless of their status in their years of service in the federal government, regardless of their ideology, if they've done wrong, then they should be held accountable. And I think the American people agree with us, and I think that was a huge issue in the election a few weeks ago. I want to switch gears and talk about FEMA, and I think a lot of people, myself included, often wonder what is the role of FEMA. So if a hurricane or a tornado or a natural disaster happens, I believe FEMA should be first on the scene. I believe that they should be in charge of obviously rescue and recovery to ensure that to help coordinate to ensure that people have food and shelter, and then of course the big role I believe FEMA plays is debris removal to try to help coordinate to get the power going, to get the roads cleared and things like that. A lot of people wonder, what then? What else is FEMA responsible for? Because I know when we had our issues in West Kentucky, people were thinking that if they didn't have insurance, that FEMA was supposed to come in and pay for that. Can you tell this committee and the American people who are watching this what exactly FEMA's role is the second a natural disaster happens, whether it's a wildfire out west or whether it's a tornado in the Midwest or whether it's a hurricane on the East Coast? What is FEMA's responsibility from start to finish, and how long should that take?
I think the best way to start that, Chairman, is the fact that all disasters are executed at the local level, they are managed at the state level and supported by the federal government, and that's where FEMA comes in. In this particular incident, I contacted governors before the storm made landfall in all of the states that were impacted, encouraging them to ask for a pre-landfall emergency declaration. What that does is it allows me to pre-position resources. And these aren't just FEMA teams, these are the federal government. It gives me the ability to direct other members of the federal government to come in and be able to respond to those immediate life-saving needs as needed after a storm passes. For these events, we pre-positioned resources from Florida up to North Carolina and into Virginia to support those immediate needs. And we do that at the support of the governor. We have teams that are embedded with the governor sitting side by side who are also communicating with the local emergency managers, the local first responders to know where those needs are so we can direct our resources to the areas that don't have enough. These all start and end with that local first responder, and they did amazing work in those first few hours after these storms passed, and our teams on the ground immediately, the search and rescue teams from across the federal government, were there doing life-saving activities as the storm were passing all of these states. We then support through mission assigning other federal agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers to help assess what the needs are going to be for debris removal, or at the request of a local jurisdiction to actually do the debris removal if they don't have the contracts to do so. And then we continue to support the stabilization of those lifelines, being able to reimburse communities if they put in a temporary bridge or if they've done something to, in the case of Asheville.
And the time's expired, but what's the normal time length for this? What do you have an objective when you go in and say, all right, this is when we hope to be finished? Do we hope everybody's paid? And do you have, is that ever a factor or an objective?
All disasters are definitely unique. My objectives and my timelines are in that response to make sure that I have teams on the ground before landfall, that they are engaged during and after landfall, and then when the governor's team tell us that the incident stabilized, then we demobilize those response teams.